can Josh Allen continue to take care of the football is the biggest question mark I have in this game. Or really, who is it that can take care of the football better? Because I think that's the team that comes out on top.
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast, presented by Verizon, the NFL powered by Verizon 5G. I am your host, Dave Helman, and as is so often the case at this time of year, things have changed a little bit in the league landscape since the last time we've talked to you. I know that's strange. It's only been a day, but that is the nature of things when you're going through the coaching carousel, the interview process, and the hiring process, and that's the big change. Look, we know the conference championships are set. We had a whole show for you about that, and we're still going to do it. Don't worry. We got Commanders, Eagles in the NFC. We got Bills, Chiefs in the AFC. We're going to take a quick early look at those two matchups, the two big burning storylines that we're curious about. We also had a great conversation with Jay Glazer earlier on Monday about some of the storylines surrounding these teams heading into conference championship weekend. We're still doing all of that, but as we were prepping the show, the biggest candidate in this year's coaching cycle took arguably maybe not the most high profile, but one of the biggest jobs in the NFL. Ben Johnson, hired to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears on Monday afternoon, ends a long flirtation between the two. So that's where we're going to start the show here. Ben Johnson being named the head coach of the Chicago Bears. And to talk about it, who better than our friend Carmen Vitali of FoxSports.com, Chicago native Carmen Vitali of FoxSports.com.
Currently in Chicago.
Who is in Chicago right now, which, okay, let's start there. There were so many uncertainties, so many variables. The Bears talked to everybody in this coaching search. And it started to feel like a long shot that they would get this big fish, this slam dunk hire of the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator. What's the vibe in Chicago now that they A, have a head coach, and B, got like the name in this cycle?
Yeah, I don't think Bears fans have learned anything over the last couple of off seasons where things look so bright and shiny and new, and then the expectations just skyrocket because of it. Listen, I'm not here to say that the Bears don't have the capability to go to the postseason next year or get to, the conference championship or what have you. But I'm just saying that this was a step in the right direction. We still need to kind of hold off a little bit. But as far as the vibe in Chicago, I mean, nobody's listening to me from that regard. I all over the place, people are celebrating. I'm surprised I don't hear fireworks right now.
Okay, so let's dive deeper into that, because again, this was, I think, from the first time Matt Eberflus screwed up this year, like way back before Thanksgiving, this was the name. Like, this is the guy who's overseen Detroit becoming this juggernaut of an offense. The trick plays, obviously. He ran the stumble bum fake fumble against the Bears at Soldier Field earlier on this season. Everybody knows all of that, but Ben Johnson officially agreeing to take the job with this Bears team, with Caleb Williams, with plenty of receiver talent, with work to do on the offensive line. Like, where do you think this starts with Ben Johnson trying to put his imprint on the Chicago Bears?
I have often referred to Ben Johnson as the purveyor of thick excellence because of how much he believes in the offensive line itself. He knows that everything really starts with a solid unit, and that's why you've seen Detroit invest so heavily in their offensive line. I mean, it really does start and end with those guys up front. And with Ben Johnson, the end of their responsibilities really doesn't exist, because you've seen guys like Penei Sewell, who is an athletic freak. He shifts sides. He pull, not even just in a pulling sense. He'll line up on the left side sometimes during these trick plays. He's gone out for passes. He's gone out to throw a pass. He's gone in the backfield as a fullback. The possibilities with the offensive line under Ben Johnson are literally limitless, and we've seen that time and time again. So it makes me really excited as someone who really loves to watch what these guys are capable of and have someone in charge who really appreciates what they bring to an offense. Outside of that, though, it starts there, but you have a really good budding young talent in Caleb Williams. That is going to be where Ben Johnson is going to have to shine. You want him to develop Caleb and really get the best out of him, like you were able to do with Jared Goff. I know Jared Goff had a lot more experience by the time Ben Johnson got to him, but what he's done for Jared Goff's career cannot be overstated. He was firmly in the MVP conversation at parts of this season and has played the best football of his career and only gotten better in the 3 seasons he's had under Ben Johnson. And that's translated to overall offensive success. You see it on the screen right now. They haven't finished lower than ranked third as far as total offense ranks go. They haven't finished lower than 5th since Ben Johnson took over in points scored per game. This is an incredibly potent offensive attack led by a guy that keeps developing his own and honing his own skills. He's so adaptable. He takes into account his personnel, all of that kind of stuff. And I cannot wait to see what he gets his hands on in Chicago. I have to think it starts with that offensive line.
I have to think you're right. And the Bears do have a top 10 pick. You know, they just drafted Darnell Wright at right tackle not all that long ago, but you can definitely add another piece on that offensive line. It feels like this is going to be a good draft class for offensive tackles. So maybe this is a year where the Bears go get a franchise left tackle. You could argue maybe they should have done that last year and they opted not to, but hey, no time like the present. Okay. One more thought about Ben Johnson and the personnel. And then I have some more front office-y types of topics I want to hit on. But you talk about Ben Johnson working with Caleb Williams. There were a lot of people that wondered how much Ben Johnson would want to coach Caleb Williams because Caleb is this freelancer and this improviser, and he needs to learn how to get rid of the ball faster. And I heard plenty of people discuss the idea that maybe Ben Johnson wants a Jared Goff in the sense that he is just a point guard who is going to get the ball to his playmakers. That's not Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is the playmaker. I'm curious what you think about Ben Johnson adapting to that type of quarterback, because Jared Goff's been wonderful in this offense, but these are two completely different approaches to playing quarterback.
Well, yeah, but I think it's unfair to project onto what Ben Johnson's ideal quarterback is. He didn't have any sort of personnel decision making ability when it came to having Jared Goff. Jared Goff was the guy that he had to work with. And at the end of the day, he got the best out of him. But I think when you look at guys that Detroit acquired while Ben Johnson was the offensive coordinator, though they're not quarterbacks, you look at a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. Brad Holmes, their general manager, took a lot of flack for drafting a running back and not the consensus first overall running back in that class at number 12. And look at what Ben Johnson has been able to do with a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. He really exploits all of Jahmyr Gibbs' skill set. He uses him in the passing game. He uses him obviously on the ground. He is a big play waiting to happen. And it's been Ben Johnson that has unlocked those kinds of things. And he loves having guys that have all of this innate playmaking ability and being able to kind of figure out an offense that, again, is going to exploit those things. So though it's not with a quarterback, I have to imagine that having a quarterback like Caleb Williams, who can factor into the run game as far as how much he scrambles, is a playmaker in the backfield. He has the opportunity to improvise, but also has the opportunity to, the ability rather to, he's got all those like sidearm angles. He doesn't have to be set on his feet to throw the ball all the way down the field. His off-platform throws, some of them have been incredible. The vision he has on the field. I have to imagine that for a guy like Ben Johnson, who's an absolute sicko, that having a guy with all of that in his toolbox is going to be so fun as far as concocting a scheme that can really exploit all of those wonderful traits that Caleb Williams has and really figure out how to stress defenses in ways that only a guy like Caleb Williams would be able to do.
Caleb got pranked by somebody saying that they were Ben Johnson a week or two ago, and I bet he like looked real hard at the text that he got on Monday before ultimately figuring out that it was true. Happy for him that he didn't get pranked this time around. All right, one last thing I wanted to touch on, which is the Bears of it all. Like, okay, football is going to be why this is successful or not successful, but there's so much other stuff that goes into it. And you and I have talked about this. It's a very interesting situation in Chicago where Ryan Poles rebuilt this roster over the last few years, but there was uncertainty about whether he would survive this. You and I talked about how much authority Kevin Warren, the team president, had in this whole thing. He's trying to get a stadium built in the Chicagoland area. On top of that, the Bears are not typically a team that spends a lot of money on their coaching staff. I don't know the number that Ben Johnson just earned, but I guarantee you it's large. So yes. What changed that led to the Bears pulling this off, A? And is this like a vote of optimism, a vote of confidence that maybe the Chicago Bears can get out of their own way a little bit?
You certainly hope so, because this does go against a lot of what we know the Chicago Bears have done historically, which is, you're right, not gone out and gotten the flashy, number one candidate in the pool type of guy. And they certainly haven't spent the amount of money that I'm assuming Ben Johnson is commanding, because he had so much interest, not just from the Bears, but from multiple other teams that were going to be willing to pay him money. The biggest thing now is that the spending is not done, because you want Ben Johnson to be bringing in experience, especially on the defensive side of the ball, so he doesn't have to worry about that. That's going to come at a premium if you're getting a guy that has coordinator experience, ideally had prior head coaching experience even. That's not going to come cheap. And if you want the best of the best, you're going to have to continue to spend to get the best of the best, and not only on the staff and their salaries, but the resources that, Ben Johnson is going to come in and say, hey, listen, I need this from my sports science department. I need this from an analytics standpoint. I need this when it comes to the meal prep that these guys are getting and all of that. That all costs money. And that's not something that the Bears have been known to do. So that needs to continue, not just with, you can't rest on getting the guy at this point. You need to surround him with the resources and the talent on staff that is going to help him be successful and set him up for success, because all of this buzz is great, and that's inevitably going to help you get that stadium built by drawing all this interest and wanting people wanting to come to Bears games, and then being in the cycle and again benefiting from that kind of revenue that comes with all of that attention. But this is far from over as far as the process goes to setting Ben Johnson now up for success in Chicago.
I think that's right. And I think you're right to remind people to be a little bit cautious and a little bit patient. This is A, it'll be year one for Ben Johnson. B,
yes,
as good as this looks on paper, nothing is a sure thing. I will just say right now, it just feels like the Bears have gotten it right. And man, you get the most coveted hire in this cycle, joining a division with 3 legitimate coach of the year candidates. That sounds fun as hell. Again, I'm not gonna go overboard right now, but you gotta
Chicago Bears Twitter has done that for you.
They'll do it for me. Yeah. Bears Twitter can go overboard. For right now, I'm just gonna say the vibes. I'll even go as far as to say the vibes feel better in Chicago than I expected them to feel, because I didn't expect them to hit this Grand Slam hire.
Yeah, this was the most defensible hire you could have made, so that even if this doesn't ultimately work out, you can say we did what we were supposed to do with the information we had at that time. Like, you absolutely cannot fault the Bears going forward for making this decision, even if it doesn't end up working out down the road. And that's the other thing I want to point out before we're off of this topic is we still don't know how Ben Johnson will be as a head coach. There is always a learning curve, no matter how good of a coordinator you are, no matter how much you saw your head coach pull off this, organizational overhaul like Ben Johnson saw Dan Campbell do in Detroit. No matter how much you've seen that and how much kind of indirect experience you have, this is still his first time in the head chair. It's his first time having to answer for the organization as a whole. It's his first time having to be accountable for every little decision on top of the offense. Again, you look even at him taking over the offensive coordinator post, being elevated from that tight ends coach position in 2022. The Lions started that season 1-6. It didn't take hold right away, as so often these things don't. You need to give Ben Johnson a leash, a long leash if you're the Chicago Bears. You need to give him patience if you're Bears fans. I don't want to hear about people saying Super Bowl right off the bat and be really just, disgruntled when it doesn't happen. This is something that is going to still take time for as good of a coordinator as he is, as great of a hire as this was. You still need to allow for there to be some bumps in the road.
I really appreciate you
I'm off
trying.
my soapbox now.
I really appreciate you trying, and you're not wrong. I have this feeling that it's going to fall on deaf ears as the 2025 season,
as it often does,
starts to draw closer, but certainly a very fun storyline to watch. Carmen's going to be back later in the show to help me talk about the NFC and AFC Championship games. But for right now, we also had a really fun conversation with Jay Glazer on Monday, talking about some other coaching news, as well as some really fun storylines heading into these conference championships. Check out our conversation with Jay right now.
Well, Jay, before we dive into football, for starters, obviously it's been a crazy couple weeks in LA. Glad to see that you're back at your place. Saw you over the weekend, doing a live hit with the first responders and the firefighters up there in the affected area with all the wildfires in LA. Just curious how that experience was. What's it been like meeting with those guys? What are you and what's Fox doing to help in the aftermath of the last 2 weeks?
I really marvel at our firefighters. This is not some cliche thing, but I marvel at people who leave their own homes to fight for ours. It's incredible. Like, they don't know me and my wife and everybody else, but there's only a couple times in life you really get to find out who you are. And they find out every time they get a call, and they run right to a fire. Most people aren't built like that. They are. So look, this compound is 100 yards from where I'm talking to you right now. A couple nights ago, we were there, handing out some more protein bars and just doing what we can. And some friends of mine say, what these firemen are asking for right now? They're like, we appreciate all these, but we really need? We really need to watch football. So when they told me this, I said, I know somebody who can make that happen. I literally called our CEO of Fox Sports, Eric Shanks, immediately. And he's like, great idea, I'm on it. And man, within less than 24 hours, he had it done. We went down there the next day, and we got 10 TVs set up for them for when they come back from their shifts. We put these TVs up where they're able to take breaks, where they eat their food, where they can decompress some. And we just want to make sure that they had a little normalcy, a little morale booster. But it was really special to be around them. And again, we're going to be going a lot. It's 100 yards from our house. So I probably have the safest house in LA right now. It's right here, but it's pretty impressive, man.
Transitioning, which, hey, football does feel trivial at times like that, but you're so right.
Oh, but it's not. It's giving them an escape.
No, and that's exactly. It's an escape. It's a sense of normalcy.
The cool thing was, the main boss there, we had to get the okay from. We're kind of, you always go through different things. We go there, and all of a sudden he comes out and he's like, hey, Jay Glazer, man, I watch you guys all the time. Man, I'm the biggest Commander fan. And I said, well, that's why we're here. Funny you should bring that up. That's why we're here. And he made it, help make this happen. So again, this is in the hardest times. These guys want to talk football, they wanted a little respite, a little break from it all.
It's a really perfect segue, Jay, because I wanted to ask you about those Washington Commanders who are in the NFC Championship game. I'm still getting used to that being real. I say it all the time. Like at my age, this is the first time in my waking life that the Commanders have been on a stage like this. What does it say about the job that Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, Jayden Daniels, all these guys have done to build this team from where they were when they took over to playing on championship weekend?
Well, there's a lot to unpack here. Number one, wasn't supposed to be Dan Quinn's job. Ben Johnson was the leader of the clubhouse, and all of a sudden he pulled out. They said, "Oh, where do we go?" And this is also the where people are off in their hiring practice. Because Dan Quinn was number one on, he and Ben Johnson were the number one and 1A on every list. And all of a sudden he had one bad game in the playoffs. And all of a sudden he went from here down to here. Had Ben Johnson not pulled out, I believe Ben would have been the head coach here. Dan Quinn would have been a coordinator again. And it was a dark time of his life. He and I have had to talk about it. Like he's like, why does no one want me? All because of one game. This is as real as it gets. Dan's a really vulnerable, real guy. And that's why players gravitate to him, coaches gravitate to him. But I remember talking to Adam Peters, the GM, like, this is who you need, not a play caller or something. You need someone. This team has gone through so much emotionally with Dan Snyder. You need somebody who's the complete opposite, is going to build everybody up from the inside out. And that's what Dan Quinn is. That's number one. Number two, Cliff Kingsbury. He's supposed to be with the Raiders. And he wanted a 3-year deal. They're only willing to give him 2. And he's already getting paid 2 years by the Cardinals.
Yeah.
So it made no sense. Like, give him 3. Like, every first-time coordinator is not going to have a 2-year deal. And at first, they would not budge. And by the time they finally they said, okay, fine. He was like, I'm out. I'm done. And he went to the Commanders. Number 3, Jayden Daniels. They had Jayden Daniels pegged as their guy from like the combine dude on. It wasn't. They had him over Caleb Williams, actually. And it was early on. And the thing that really put him over the edge for everybody else is, and this is right from Dan Quinn, everybody you spoke to about him talked about how hard he works. He works so hard at everything. And it's not, being a quarterback is not just about studying your playbook and working your butt off with your playbook. It's about so many other things. It's about training your body. It's about training your eyes. It's about training your mind. It's about training your habits of, we have the greatest quarterback who ever lived as our number one game analyst, and it was sleep, diet. Man, how do you make your teammates better? How do you go over, like, I've been at practice before Tom Brady's walking over to a practice squad corner saying, hey man, I'm seeing you do this. When I'm looking at this, you're doing this, which allows me to attack you here. So he's making that guy better. So it makes his offense better. So the scout team's better when his offense goes against that. It's all about that. So if you have a guy that and a lot of guys come in this league, I've trained, almost 1,000 of these players in mixed martial arts, and I can't tell you how many of these guys come in and they think what made them great in college, I'm good. What made me great in college is it's gonna do the same thing in the NFL. That's not it. You've got to outwork the world every single year. Derwin James, we trained him this offseason. And he said, hey, I'm going in year, I think it was 7 or whatever it was. And he's like, now's the time. I need to start switching things up. What worked for me in the past, I know is not going to work for me in the future. I've got to do things. So I'm going to come learn, train in mixed martial arts to help with my hips and in between my ears and, my leverage and things like that, my explosiveness and my violence. But here he is going to year 7, and I think it's 7. But
I think you're right. 2018. Yeah.
I can't add that. But that's what you have to do. It's like, hey, what can I do better every year? I can't just go off my God-given talent that I had in college. So when you know that about Jayden Daniels, you're golden. And, Dan Quinn, I talked to him before the game. The hope he gives people, I had him and Dan Campbell FaceTime our firefighters, which is amazing, right before the game.
That is amazing.
They want to thank them. They want to, pump them up, but also just thank them, tell them how appreciative they are and how much they admire them. And right before DQ and I are talking, he's like, hey man, we're good. We are swinging away today. He is so optimistic. And he sure did. And we talked right after the game too. I said, hey, you told me you're going to swing away. He said, damn right we were. And we did. We were looking to punch people in the mouth. And that's what we did. Like, that's him. I've known this cat since he was a D-line coach with the 49ers in the 90s. And like, I've never, ever, even his bad days, it's our best. Like, the way he acts on his worst days is how we hope to act on our best days. He's just this beacon of light.
It's so crazy to think on a weekend like this, there's only 4 teams left playing. how many sliding door moments happened for all of these teams to get to where they are, whether it's Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury, or I mean, you could go down the list for all four teams that are still playing. It's just it's hard to comprehend sometimes how many decisions have to go right for all of these teams to get this high up the mountain.
Yeah, he's again. I won't count Dan Quinn, and I've told everybody, dude, where it's hard to go to work in Washington under Dan Snyder. Everybody who's looking for a head coach, I'm like, you will love going to work every day with this guy, Dan Quinn.
Last thing I wanted to ask you about is, I think if you're paying attention, you should be prepared for the Cowboys coaching search to go in any direction. But I was a little surprised to learn that Brian Schottenheimer is the betting favorite in Vegas right now. I started hearing whispers about it over the weekend.
Wrong so far, though. So just want to tell you that.
Even the fact that he is the betting favorite is interesting to me.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I know they want to retain Schottenheimer. They want Dak in it. Just talking to people I talked to in Dallas, they want to make sure that Dak has the same system around him, right? And that's why they brought in, interviewed Kellen Moore and Schottenheimer. So he's really liked in that organization. I don't know if it's going to be a head coach or offensive coordinator, but I know that, I think their hope is that, he's still there with Dak. Now, look, things can happen though. You never know. With somebody else may come in, blow them out of the word, say, "Hey, I got this to help with Dak," and so it's it'll be interesting to see which way they go.
If continuity around Dak is something that they're that interested, I mean, it's easy to hear.
Here's the one thing though, the problem is when McCarthy was there, he and Dak were great too, but he had Schottenheimer kind of do a lot of the stuff, right? So Mike kind of oversee the team and stuff like that. For Schotty, I think it'll be a little bit more of, if he's the head coach and the offensive coordinator, he's not able to be as much of the head coach because he really got to, again, Mike McCarthy had a Brian Schottenheimer to help
right.
that. I don't know what Schotty's plan would be.
Hearing that though, it's easy to assume that they would really like to hire Kellen Moore when he's available to hire. Or do you?
No, I'm not assuming that either. Because again, he went in and interviewed, but or he interviewed, I think, on Zoom.
Right.
Yeah, it had to been on Zoom. I'm not saying that either. I think from when I talked to people in the Cowboys, they're kind of doing their initial look at people and then taking a step back. I'm going to reload, here coming up.
Be interesting to see how that plays out. All right, Jay, it's good to see you, man. I appreciate the time.
It can also take somebody completely different to say, hey, here's who we want as an offense coordinator. Here's who we want as a defense coordinator. Here you go, lead the team.
I mean, I'll keep saying it. Nothing with the Cowboys should be off the table, clearly, based on the last 3 or 4 days. Yeah. Good to see you, man. I'm glad you're able to get back into your house. I will chat with you soon.
Yeah. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks again to Jay for stopping by. And to wrap this show up, let's take an early look at these conference championships. Not going to dive into like a full game preview right now. Just trying to take a 30,000-foot view of the conference championships. We're going to start with the NFC Championship game. It's presented by Intuit QuickBooks. Your way to money. It's the NFC East rubber match. Eagles and Commanders split the season series. They now play a third game with the Super Bowl on the line. I can't get enough of it. Carmen Vitali joins me again of FoxSports.com to preview these two games. And Carm, our idea for this was just to look at one singular facet of this game, whether it's the biggest, the most interesting, whatever, just the one burning question that we have. And stop me if this is a little too basic, but I just think this game begins and ends with how well the Washington Commanders handle Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Is that oversimplistic? Absolutely. But
sometimes it's that easy.
Yeah. Sometimes it's that easy. And especially when you consider that there have been times that the Washington run defense has been a little suspect this year. I mean, they're aggressively average as far as the metrics go. If you look at the season, 18th in EPA per carry allowed this season. So when you're an average run defense going against a very not average running back, that's concerning.
I saw a friend of the show, our guy Aaron Schatz, the analytics wizard for FTN Fantasy, just puts out some of the best numbers every single week. He was joking on social on Monday that Commanders fans are on his case because people have been calling them the worst run defense in the league. And they've improved over the second half of the season. Congratulations, Commanders. You've improved to 19th against the run by DVOA. For the season, they're 26th in rushing DVOA. And yeah, it is a little simplistic, but when you look at the numbers, I think it's everything about this game. They've allowed 64 explosive runs this year. It's tied for 5th worst in the NFL. They've allowed an explosive run on 13% of their opposing carries, which again is a really bad number. And it bears out when you go back and look at their 2 games against Philadelphia. Saquon Barkley went for 150 in each of them, and he had 3 explosive touchdown runs, 23, 39, 68. And if you're allowing that type of production, I understand the irony that the Commanders did wind up winning one of those games. But generally, if you're allowing that type of production in the run game, it's going to be a bad combination for you.
And if you look at even just this last game against the Detroit Lions, if the Lions offense doesn't commit 5 turnovers, I'm not entirely sure I'm almost positive the Commanders actually don't win that game. And when it mattered most, it was kind of, it boggled my mind that Detroit didn't continue to go on the ground, especially with a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, who was averaging 7.5 yards per carry for the game. He totaled 105 yards, 2 touchdowns on 14 carries, and recorded a career high 5 runs of 10 or more yards. That's all according to Next Gen Stats. That's something that's really concerning, and it's baffling why Detroit didn't try to run Gibbs more, because it was working. He forced 6 missed tackles across all of his touches, and this was his 8th game with 6 or more missed tackles on the season. Who else is really good at forcing missed tackles on the run? Guess what? It's Saquon Barkley. So if you're the Commanders defense and you are missing these tackles against Jahmyr Gibbs, who, yes, is an incredible running back, very shifty, all of this stuff, then I don't have a whole lot of confidence in you to be able to tackle Saquon Barkley, who flirted with the all-time rushing record this year. It's really concerning to me, because you know that Philly will run Saquon until they can't run him anymore. And not to mention, there's another factor in Philly's rushing attack. It's not just Saquon. It's also Jalen Hurts, because before suffering his left knee injury in this last game, Hurts had 71 rushing yards on 6 carries and had a 44-yard touchdown run on the game's opening drive. So this is something like you need to take into account, that you have 2 runners you have to consider here.
And if we're not talking about Saquon and the Commanders' ability to slow him down, then it's got to be this Jalen Hurts situation where he did injure his knee. He looked like a completely different player after that injury happened against the Rams. I looked this up. I was curious. Obviously, the Eagles could have had a better day throwing the ball in that game with a little bit better luck. You know, A.J. Brown drops an explosive gain, a huge red zone play. I believe it was by Dallas Goedert. Gets called back by a Mekhi Becton penalty. But after that injury, Jalen Hurts did not look comfortable passing the ball. Obviously, he was sacked 9 times. He was also sacked 3 times on 4 dropbacks against the blitz. So the Rams did not blitz him often, but when they did, it worked. It worked really, really well, because Jalen Hurts was not mobile by the end of that game. I'm curious if Dan Quinn decides to test that in this matchup and say, when you do throw, we're going to come after you. Because if you're talking about trying to slow down Saquon Barkley, here's the thing. He's going to get his yards in this game. But if you can get sacks reliably or get negative plays reliably out of the passing game, Saquon Barkley on 3rd and 14 or Saquon Barkley on 3rd and 9 is a little bit less scary than Saquon Barkley on a normal down and distance with the offense operating in schedule. So I do think, you know, what's Bruce Arians always say? No risk it, no biscuit.
No. Wow.
if you can put
Throwback.
if you're willing to pressure Hurts, blitz Hurts, take advantage of this, what I assume is going to be a lack of mobility, and put them behind the sticks, you certainly, I think we got to just let go of the idea that you're going to stop Saquon Barkley, but you can make him a little bit less effective. And when the Commanders' entire strength as a team is an offense that doesn't punt the ball, maybe that's enough.
Maybe. But I think you're right in saying that this is going to be the biggest question mark of the game, is how do you limit Saquon Barkley? Can you get creative in doing so? Like you're alluding to, it's not necessarily just stuffing him or tackling him or anything like that. It's putting him in those situations that you don't usually convert when you're sticking to the ground game and kind of forcing Jalen Hurts to have to throw the ball. Though we've seen that work out for them too. The more one-dimensional you can make them, the better.
Completely true. And yet I have this bad feeling that the Eagles could be completely one-dimensional and still be highly successful in this game. Like if there is a part of me that believes that if Jahmyr Gibbs had gotten 25 carries on Saturday night, we're previewing a different game. Ironically, we talked about Ben Johnson earlier in the show. If Ben Johnson had been a little more stubbornly committed to the run, that game maybe goes a different way. And like you said earlier, I don't think the Eagles are going to be afraid to be stubborn, especially with a quarterback that is nursing a knee injury.
Saquon Barkley can he's one of the best at yards after contact and everything like that. So it's one of those things where even if you get a body on him right away, that doesn't necessarily mean to bring him down.
Yeah, it's a scary proposition. Like, you can do everything right against a player like Saquon Barkley and still wind up watching him running into the end zone. I think an equally big part of this is going to be the Commanders simply not letting him be on the field. Like, this is absolutely a game where your offense is an equal part.
Good thing
of
they go
defense.
for it on fourth down quite a bit.
Do it more often, guys. Anytime it comes up, as long as it's not like 4th and 12, it might be a good idea in this matchup. Plenty more to say about that game as the week goes along. But on the flip side, I charged you with coming up with the biggest storyline for this AFC matchup. Josh versus Pat 4.0. What'd you come up with?
Again, kind of a simplistic, kind of overarching thing, but can Josh Allen continue to take care of the football in the way that he has been this postseason? No turnover. He's yet to commit a turnover this postseason, and actually hasn't committed a turnover in the last 4 postseason games going back to last season. And also, Josh Allen has had just 1 interception in the last 8 weeks in 7 games played, no fumbles in that span. So he's been taking care of the football. He has completely flipped that reckless narrative on its head and is extraordinarily careful and efficient with the football. Does that continue against the Kansas City Chiefs? He threw 1 interception the last time these two teams played in the regular season earlier this season. But hey, the Bills won that game too, even with the interception committed. So you have a little bit of leeway, I think, if you're Josh Allen. But the more that you can take care of the football and not give Patrick Mahomes and company extra chances, especially in the postseason, the better off the Bills are going to be. But is that feasible? Can you continue to do that? And who is it? Is it Josh? Is it the offensive line? All of that kind of stuff. I've got more stats to go into it, but I'd be interested to see what you think of my oversimplification of this or not.
You know what's funny? I went back and looked up. Josh has thrown 1 interception in the last 8 weeks, like you said, or turned the ball over 1 time. It was an interception against New England. Yes. And I was curious. I went back and watched it again. And you know what happened on the play? Josh broke out of the pocket and decided to play YOLO ball and just heave a 55-yard throw into the end zone against double coverage. Like, it was vintage F it Josh Allen, where he's just like, Keon Coleman's down there, screw it, maybe this will work. And it did not work at all. Which, hey,
fair.
Sometimes it does, and that's the beauty of Josh Allen. But like, other than that moment, he just hasn't been doing that. We joked about it with Henry McKenna on the recap show. It was wild watching him on the goal line against Baltimore the other night consider pitching it on a goal line sneak with everything on the line. He considered throwing it to James Cook, and like in the moment, you could see him regain his faculties and realize like, no, that is a terrible idea. It is not worth the risk.
Let me just, yeah.
But the way that he has been able to harness that over the last half of the season, it's really impressive. And yeah, I mean, I don't think it's as easy as playing a clean game against Kansas City. Like, you know, we joked about that too. Like the Bills just let the Ravens self-destruct. They let them make all the mistakes. I think the Chiefs are too good in high leverage moments for you to simply let them beat themselves. Because I looked this up too, Carm. The Chiefs were on pace for 24 turnovers at the midpoint of the season. They had 2 turnovers against the Bills in that loss in the regular season, and they just haven't done it since. They had 14 turnovers at the midpoint of the year, and they're sitting on 14 turnovers right now. Like, that is an insane stat that they lost to their arch nemesis, the Bills, and Patrick Mahomes was basically like, all right, we're done with that. We're playing clean, efficient football the rest of the way.
Pristine football.
So well, I'm with you. I'm with you that it is important. I will say this. I can't imagine the Bills win this game without playing a clean effort. Fair. But I do think it's going to take more than that to take the Chiefs down.
I agree. And I think the more than that part is what I want to go a little further on, because the easiest way to play a clean game, and I think a big reason why Josh has been able to play so efficiently has been this Bills offensive line that has really just not gotten the due it deserves all season long. I mean, I think that some people are starting to wise up, but what Aaron Kromer is doing with his unit and how they're prioritizing making sure that Josh is safe and Josh is not being pressured. He was only pressured on 5 of his dropbacks versus the Ravens in this last game. And the thing is, the Bills are very self-aware. They know if Josh Allen is pressured, that puts him in more precarious situations. When he was pressured on those 5 dropbacks, his passer rating went all the way down, and he was just 2 for 5 for 39 yards, 67.9 passer rating in those 5 dropbacks when pressured. And during the regular season, that's been kind of the case for Josh Allen. And what has led to some turnovers in the past is when he is pressured, he has got a passer rating of 80.9 versus when he is not pressured, his passer rating goes up to 109.5. And he's ludicrously more productive when he's not pressured. And that's the case for anybody. But he hasn't really had to deal with a whole lot of pressure this season, thanks to this offensive line. And not to mention, thanks to their willingness to go with these jumbo formations, which we saw a ton of versus the Ravens. You didn't actually see it a whole lot in their first meeting in the regular season. But then this last game, 22% of their offensive snaps were done with behind 6 or more offensive linemen. So that's something that they know for certain, that they are going to try to protect Josh Allen at all costs, to give him time to scramble around, to do all of the Josh Allen things that he loves to do. But they're going to run into a Steve Spagnuolo defense led by Chris Jones on that defensive line that are good at getting pressure. They're not amazing. The stats won't tell you that they're amazing this year. But the fact that they have a guy like Chris Jones that can move all along that defensive line and exploit certain matchups along an offensive line, that's where I start to get concerned. And that's what I think the Chiefs are going to go after. The more you can pressure Josh Allen, the higher the chance is that he is going to be forced into something as far as an errant throw, or maybe making those turnovers that we haven't seen him make. That's the best chance Kansas City has of creating those takeaways, is to get pressure on Josh Allen.
I wonder how similar the Bills might look against the Chiefs as they did against the Ravens, because all of that is right. The Bills mitigated that aspect of it in that game, and I'm sure part of it was the weather, but Josh averaged less than 6 yards per attempt, and the Bills just bullyballed Baltimore. I mean, they ran for 150 yards. They ran 36 times. Like, the vast majority of that game was trying to keep Josh Allen from having to be the guy making every single play. And the Ravens, the second best run defense in the league by success rate, and the Bills ran all over them. I look at that and I wonder, I mean, the Chiefs are not an offense that, at least for the vast majority of this year, they're not an offense that you have to like keep up with. I really don't expect this game to be a track meet. I expect this game to be like low 20s. And if you make a mistake, it could be fatal. But yeah, like maybe the Bills try to duplicate that success and just pound the rock, man.
I think that would be wise. I've talked a lot about how much James Cook matters to this Bills offense. And again, that's another testament to how good this offensive line has been in blocking for James Cook and letting him get loose on some of those explosive runs that we've seen from him. Or, I mean, which was what's more accurate from this last game versus Baltimore was, I mean, James Cook's stat line wasn't anything crazy, but the runs that like the third down runs, the runs into, just the ones that mattered, getting those first downs, continuing drives, those were so incredibly crucial and they came at crucial times. And it was exactly what the Buffalo Bills needed at the time to allow Josh Allen to stay on the field. And then in this case, if you can extend these drives, prolong these drives, you're looking at 11, 12, 13 play scoring drives for the Buffalo Bills. That means that you are keeping Patrick Mahomes and all of what Patrick Mahomes can do off the field as much as humanly possible.
It's funny too, because as good as these teams have been at not giving the ball away, they do take it away. The Bills have had 14 takeaways in that same stretch. They had 3 against Baltimore. Baltimore, one of the best teams at avoiding turnovers in the entire league. Kansas City, I think if you go back and look at it, one game against Cleveland where they had 6 takeaways kind of skews the numbers. As good as they've been, this isn't a unit that gets a ton of takeaways. So I'm curious to see which of those units has more success if either of them do. I don't know. There's too much on the line for me to think that this is a game with no turnovers. I suppose that's possible, but I'm curious which unit makes the bigger play. And yeah, with so much emphasis on ball security, it could just be as simple as one minor mistake that leads to the biggest talking point on Monday morning. Very similar to what we're doing with Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews right now.
And you've seen just overall in these playoffs this year, teams that win the turnover battle, I believe, are 7-0. There were 3 games with the turnover margin was tied. But like when teams win the turnover battle, they win the game. We've seen that in this postseason. So I have to think that that's going to play a huge role in this game, which is why, as oversimplified as it was, can Josh Allen continue to take care of the football is the biggest question mark I have in this game. Or really, who is it that can take care of the football better? Because I think that's the team that comes out on top.
Chiefs Bills is a great battle, but Josh Allen battling his inner nature to avoid
like the things on each side of his like little green goblin mouth, just telling him throw it, and see what happens, throw it.
I'm kidding, but not really, because again, the Chiefs have broken the Bills' hearts so many times. There's going to be a temptation to make the play and break through and score the touchdown that's going to finally get you past the Chiefs and into the Super Bowl. But is it the right play at the right time? And how does Josh Allen kind of balance his inner nature versus what is the right thing to do? I mean, he's the one that said it. Like but inside of him, there are 2 wolves. So we'll see.
Honestly, since he said that though, he has been really good at listening to the right wolf.
I love that we just incorporated that meme into this. I cannot wait to see how he responds. We got so much left to say about this game. It doesn't really need an introduction, but just one of many fascinating subplots. Carm, I'm sure we'll check in with you again soon. Make sure you say hi to Ben Johnson for us. I'm guessing he'll be introduced in Chicago sometime over the next few days. But as always, we appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
All right, that does it for the show. Thanks again to Carmen. Thanks again to Jay Glazer. We will be back Thursday to dive further into both of these conference championships. So many storylines, so many angles left to get to. that'll be in your feed Thursday. Make sure you're subscribed, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your pods, you'll be able to find it there. If there's any more coaching news, all of it, we got you covered. Whatever's coming our way here over the next few days as we get ready for conference championships, we will be there. We got you. I'll catch you next time. As always, I appreciate it.